It is a pleasure to finally welcome you to the World Football Summit podcast. Today we are recording live from World Football Summit Europe 2024. And I think there's so much to talk about in terms of data that I thought, who can I speak to? And I saw your name came up like instantly. So welcome to the show.
Thank you, Jamie. It's a real pleasure to be here. We're live in Valencia, and I must say the energy is through the roof, right? It's like well over 1,000 people here today.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, and we're early in the day, so hopefully we're going to get more and more people as these 2 days go by. And not only about the amount of people, but I think the energy. I just feel like a different vibe today. And that's not because I'm recording the podcast or anything. I just see that there's so much activity. Yeah. So, yeah.
Well,
today's way, I just want to, again, as I said, everybody's talking about data. You've just been at a panel talking about data. You've actually been in a lot of our events talking about data, about, the evolution of, how to interpret it. And that's the conversation that I want to have with you today. So to start, one thing is to gather data. I think everybody has access to data. But what can we say about gathering quality data? I know it's important, but how can actually football clubs actually get prepared to gather that quality data?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think first of all, it's important to define what type of data our clubs looking for.
Good point.
Quite often right now, there are billions and billions of data points out there. So understanding what type of data set that we're looking for is really important, number one. Number two, from an AI standpoint, obviously there is a great deal of bias that's involved in terms of data sets out there. So understanding what that may or may not be. And I think finally around to that point as well would be around, data per department or data per sector within football is extremely powerful. So what does that mean? Being a little bit more niche, being a little bit more specific, that can really help pivot a club's decision making, both in the short and the long term as well.
Yeah, and I guess, well, that's a good point. What is quality data? Obviously, you have to understand what that is. But then it's not only about the data itself; it's also about understanding and acting upon it. No, so you've worked with a lot of businesses, and even looking outside football, you have a lot of experience. How does that look like? How do the best actually understand and act upon the data that they gather?
Yeah, well, I think the first thing is it's really important to have a defined strategy in place.
Yeah.
So very measurable KPIs that work across multiple stakeholders. I think quite often when people get really excited to run into the AI gold rush, data in itself will only solve a portion of the problems out there. The other part really comes from long-term thinking, defining a strategy and ensuring that your AI and your data sets are in line with that as well.
Yeah, and that's a good point, actually. The strategy comes before any type of technological implementation. And at the end of the day, that strategy, I believe, has to be driven by fan insights. What would you say about that? Is there any... How can clubs really tap into understanding where their fans? How do you believe they can do that to the best of their ability?
Yeah. So I think if we take a step back and to your point around defining the strategy, often when you put together a C-suite, it's really important to ensure that they are understanding how they interact with data, how they define the strategy, and then on top of that, how they're actually interacting with the entire football ecosystem. And the fan engagement, and I think the fan lifecycle is an incredibly important part of that. I think one of the things that's most commonly known is that the vast majority of fans don't exist in that particular city.
Right.
So if we're here with Sevilla, for example, it's a tremendous opportunity for a club like Sevilla to leverage the data that's out there to tap into that fan base, and that individual that might be in Bangkok, in Sydney, in Shanghai, they become a lot more closer to the club over the entire life cycle of supporting that club.
Yeah.
The second element is how do you also localize the offering for fans physically being based here in Sevilla? So I think often what would happen is you'd go to the game, maybe you'd enjoy a beer or two, perhaps a pie, and that would consist of your entire football experience. Now we have a chance to develop ecosystems of properties like a fan park, like digital engagement as well, to ensure that we personalize that experience, but more important, we continue to create those memories. Because at the end of the day, what will fade over time will be that result that very day, but that picture of you with your father, your siblings, that will stand the test of time.
I love that, because that's something that I always say. Football is a source of unique memories, of stories. I mean, you always know where you were when your favorite team scored that winning goal, and who you were with, So, and tapping into that, that's actually where football and sports have a competitive advantage versus other industries, that passion, those memories, no? And to your point earlier about the C-suite, I was wondering because obviously a lot of clubs are starting to have more professionals that are specialized to understand data, but this is not necessarily something that the C-suite is, accustomed to. So how can someone that doesn't have a background in data or data management, what can they do? What tips do you have for them in terms of, okay, what do I need to understand to actually use this data to the benefit of the organization?
Yeah, I mean, that's an excellent question. So quite often when people think about concepts like AI, data, machine learning, they can seem almost like a foreign language at start, right? What's really important to remember is that we're at the start of this journey collectively. So that means I don't know any more than you and vice versa. So there's a tremendous opportunity to upskill. How upskilling can happen in the C-suite can be bringing specialists like you attested to, or it can be from actually just taking an interest in terms of how the business is being run and how it can be optimized, utilizing technologies in various different tech stacks. And in my opinion, some of the best football operations out there are usually like married between having specialists, but also having executives that are very interested in this topic. And the best way to do so is by taking interest and also asking questions.
Yeah, asking questions, curiosity, that's kind of like, the key thing. And speaking about questions that, and it's actually coming back to something that you made reference to earlier. There's this debate in the industry about, when you use data, is it to get customers to to have fans become customers? Or is it more that, you want your customers to become fans for sports organizations? So there's kind of like a debate. I don't know where you stand upon that debate.
Yeah, that's a tricky one. I think that's probably a little bit of both, really. So I think historically, it's been a very transactional relationship between the fan and the club, right? So what does that mean? Like, you go in there to consume the sport, and of course there's emotion involved as well, but really there's a clear start and an end point in terms of how we interact with that club. Moving forward, now we have the opportunity to get real insights in terms of what is the identity of your club, what are the values of your club, how does the club project itself outside of match day. And I think all of those aspects are as interesting to the fan today as they maybe would have been back in the day, but they just didn't have the opportunity to really get that insight into how a club was being run.
Yeah, that's true. And speaking about AI, I mean, because obviously the use cases that a lot of people understand, that's content creation, data analysis, but I don't know if there's any area where you believe it's kind of like untapped still in terms of the use of AI for a football club to actually thrive as a business, or have we discovered everything yet?
Yeah, I absolutely don't feel we've discovered anything yet. We're a long way off from that. I think one of the interesting things around what you mentioned is around content and how clubs are evolving over time. So I had a really interesting conversation with one of the other guests yesterday at the opening night drinks. And we were talking about how football clubs over time will become their own movie studios or equivalent, right? So that is a really interesting, transformative concept to think about. So storytelling is at the heart of every club. You have the opportunity to leverage social media. You have the opportunity to leverage long-form content in the form of documentaries. I think there was recently a documentary out in the Venice Film Festival. I think Juventus were one of the first to do that as well. So what you're seeing is football being represented through many different contexts. Right. And the conduit for that is technology.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, I think we're in an era where you see clubs like Inter City, they're building community, they're building, well, of course, Wrexham is another clear example, They're building a lot of content and they're building a lot of stories where football is the essence, but where you can see them diversifying into different, call it revenue streams or business models. And I think this is where data ties it all together. It's really understanding where the fan is to actually be able to create a relevant offering or value proposition for them, right? I mean, I don't know if that's the way I see it. I might be wrong there.
Yeah, you're right. And I think one of the things that's important to understand is, from our standpoint, when we look at the football industry at large, it was pretty much status quo for decade upon decades, now technology's come in. And even if you look at fan-centric engagement, that term, I almost feel a little bit bad saying that. I'm a fan, right? I don't want to be measured based on metrics, quote unquote. But ultimately, if we can deliver a product that's a little bit more personalized, I think that can really benefit both the fan and the club alike. And I think outside of that, we talk about interesting things such as how to utilize data, how to look at data sets, how to apply AI. What needs to exist is this overarching layer of leadership. And leadership is done through compassion, empathy, understanding, awareness. And the question I often ask myself is that as technology is leading, are we as leaders keeping up with that pace? Because one thing that's for sure is that whatever machines are out there, they will not replace humans.
Exactly. And I couldn't agree more. I mean, the soft skills that you need, no technology can replace. And it's also something when people ask me about the value of events like this, I always say, look, in an era of technology, there's nothing like a conversation of 10 minutes with someone at an in-person event. You would not believe how that can stand the test of time, So I think that human element is always going to be there. It's actually what it's going to make us really unique in terms of, everybody feeling threatened about the use of technology. And I think not at all. I think we always have that distinct advantage. Speaking about the experience, I wanted to ask you, because you've been at several of our events, I wanted to understand, what value do you get out of these events?
Yeah, well, WFS has been like a tremendous event for me personally, as someone that's attended multiple sports industry events before. I think one thing that's unique is the global footprint. So I started my WFS journey in Riyadh, and when I saw you, was it now close to 12 months ago now? Then I was across to London at the Tottenham Hotspur stadiums prior to the Champions League final, and now we're here in Sevilla. And I can say that, WFS has been great in terms of cultivating a culture that it creates genuine engagement and also just great people, right? I mean, I can count so many people that I've kept in touch with outside of these events as well. And I think that's a really testament to how you guys curate your programming and also how welcome you feel everyone feels.
Wow. Well, I appreciate the kind words. At the end of the day, it's all about the people that are like you, that come, that add value, that bring knowledge, that are, willing to network and find opportunity. That's what the football that, we believe, that's the football we need. And speaking about the football we need, I want to finish up with this question, Zubair, is, as you know, we launched a rebrand last year. And at World Football Summit, we believe that the industry needs to be more professional. It needs to embrace innovation and sustainability across the three pillars. So it's the financial, it's social, it's the environmental piece as well. We summarize this under the claim, the football we want, the football we need. So if I were to ask you to define really briefly today, you don't need to go into a lot of detail, but just like 1-2 sentences of, the football that you want, the football you need, how would you do it?
Yeah, I think the football we need is a football that conveys passion, is a football that conveys empathy, and it's a football that connects with the soul. And what do I mean by that? I think the community has always been the soul. And I think it's really important that as we evolve and we grow football and take it globally, that we retain what made it unique in the first place, which is the sheer enjoyment of seeing the ball hit the back of the net.
Fantastic. I appreciate that answer. Thank you so much, Zubair. And thank you so much for this great conversation. It's been fun. I was looking forward to speaking to you, and I'm absolutely thrilled we made it happen.
It's been a real pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.